Heyer, and I'm the current chair of the board of the Community Foundation. I'm so glad to welcome and see your faces in this work that we do together. Some of you as donors, some of you as community partners. I know some people who are plan to be on the call are in the First Steps Collaborative. We have lots and lots of people who make our impact across the New River Valley really happen. So we've had an extraordinary year, and that's part of what we want to talk about. We, like every other nonprofit, have had to cancel every kind of in-person event that would have drawn us together and been able to celebrate our scholarship recipients, Laura. We miss that so much. Our grantee reception that we usually do, and then usually at the end of the year, we do a donor appreciation event. So we are just glad to be able to connect with you by Zoom and let you know how important your work is to making the impact of the Community Foundation really felt in our community area. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you do for our area and for the Community Foundation in particular. And we welcome you here. It's been quite an interesting story. We hope that many of you have gotten the annual report. I may be the last one to get one. But I may have to drive over there and get one myself. But I hope you got an annual report because it really gives you a feeling for all the work that has gone on and the ways in which our donor contributions have made an impact on the New River Valley in so many different areas, whether it be the arts, human need, homeless assistance, food insecurity, our child development programs, and so on and so forth. There's just so many different areas in which the Community Foundation funds make a difference. So we're going to talk a little bit about what has gone right this year, despite the pandemic. I want to start with Jess, if you want to outline some of those programs, and maybe you want to move to a speaker view, or maybe that'll happen automatically when we get into your PowerPoint.
Sounds good. Thanks, Pat. And thank you again, everybody, for being here. As Pat said, and you can rename yourself if you want to, just to indicate your affiliation with the foundation. But I can say, as I look around the screen, that many of you could probably give the presentation that I'm about to give, whether you're donors who have helped support the grants that we've given out this year, or nonprofits that have been a part of this work. So in the second half of our hour together, we're going to have some time just to talk through what you're seeing out in the community, both not just the needs that you've seen, but also some of the incredible innovation that we've seen in the community. We're blessed to live in an area that is incredibly collaborative and creative, and I think we've seen a lot of that this year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just what we've been doing over the course of 2020, a little bit about what we're seeing as key needs and what we've learned as well about giving, particularly during COVID. And I'll be joined by some members of our board and some partners who will also speak to that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see some lovely pictures of what we've done this year. And just give me a quick nod if you can see that. See it good? Okay. So it has been an incredibly eventful year for all of us, but certainly at the Community Foundation. And as Pat said, it's looked quite a bit different from what we've done in the past. So much of what the foundation values is the personal connection
if you want to make a comment
that we can have with each one of you. And so it's been difficult to not be able to have those in-person events. But at the same time, it's been really heartening to see the level of giving and the creativity that we've seen. So this has really been a record year for the foundation in so many ways. This will be our biggest year of giving in the history of the foundation, 26 years of giving. We're going to give out over $600,000 this year in grants and scholarships made possible with all of the donors that support us. So to start, it was a record year for us, particularly in scholarships. Our scholarship program started back in 2002 with just one small $500 scholarship, and it's grown, as you can see, quite a bit over the last several years to well over $100,000 that we give each year. I always say for new board members or volunteers to the foundation that reading scholarship applications is by far the most enriching and humbling experience that you can have at the foundation, and this year was no different. So while we count the amount of money that we give out and the number of students we support, it's really about those personal stories exemplified by folks like Zachary here, and how much these scholarships mean to them, not just from a financial perspective, but also the vote of confidence from the community that they can be successful. So a wonderful year for scholarships that we were able to continue to do our review in person until right before COVID. And we are hopeful that we'll be able to celebrate these students and our 2021 recipients in person next year. It's also been a record year for us in grants, and we'll talk a little bit later in more depth about our approach to grant making this year. You may know that the foundation gives out grants in a lot of different ways. So we give those grants out through competitive application processes. This year, that was our COVID-19 response, as well as our responsive grant program. And those together account for about $240,000 of our overall giving. But we also have many donors who give throughout the year from their donor advised funds that are a significant part of our grant making. So as of today, we're well over $460,000 in grants to local nonprofits, and we've still got some donors making some wonderful end of year gifts. So we will exceed $500,000 in grants for sure this year. And again, just like with scholarships, while we count the amount that we give and what percentage of applications we're able to support, it's really about the individual work that each nonprofit is doing. And there's just been some incredible stories of how nonprofits have pivoted quickly and with great innovation to continue their work and oftentimes meet a higher demand for service. And we've got several folks on the call who can speak to that in detail. As you know, grants and scholarships are just part of what the foundation does. We have for a very long time really invested in capacity building for local nonprofits. Most folks know us for the Third Thursday Society that meets in person monthly. And of course, that couldn't happen during COVID, but we did switch over to nonprofit listening sessions via Zoom, just like this. And we're able to have several great discussions and topics around things like accessing the PPP loan program for nonprofits, thinking through how to handle mental and emotional trauma and address, self-care during the pandemic, engaging volunteers, engaging donors, et cetera. Those have been really helpful conversations. And I think it's as much about giving out information in those topic areas as it is just seeing one another and having the opportunity to hear from colleagues about how they're managing. In addition, as you know, we host an annual online giving day. This year, we switched to a new platform and a new name, Give Local NRV, and had decided a while ago that we were going to move our giving date to June. And that ended up being pretty fortuitous because it gave all of us the opportunity to prepare during COVID for taking advantage of this online giving platform. It was again a record year for us. So over $400,000 raised for 80 nonprofits through that website this year, and over 1.6 million since we started the annual giving day in 2014. The platform is also available year round, hence the URL there for you. So organizations can continue to use the site to raise money and have been doing so with Giving Tuesday and other opportunities throughout the year to raise money and to get information out about the work that they do. In addition, we do a lot of collaborative work. The New River Valley is really known for being a collaborative community despite really unique individual locations and counties. We work together well. And that has certainly been the case during COVID. We could go through many examples of this, and Morris Fleischer is going to talk a little bit later about our food access initiative, Thrive. But I wanted to point out in particular the work that we've been doing this year with First Steps. This is our early education and development network. Well over 60 different organizations, childcare centers, social service agencies, health agencies, that are focused on supporting young children and families. And as you have probably seen in the news, childcare has been particularly essential and hard hit during the pandemic. So we've done a lot of work this year as a network around advocacy. You can see that we were pleased to host Senator Tim Kaine in July to talk about the importance of childcare in communities. We did a lot of work around best practices and trying to share with one another what was working well in individual organizations or childcare centers. We helped Montgomery County, the town of Blacksburg, and the town of Christiansburg craft their childcare recovery grant parameters. So we're able to help them understand the particular needs of childcare centers. And then finally, just held a few weeks ago, a wonderful session with both Head Start and several public school representatives around virtual learning and both the challenges and opportunities of that. It's great conversations and wonderful work in that area. It's also been a wonderful year in working with donors, and many of you who are on the call have been most generous with the funds that you've had at the foundation. We also have several new funds at the foundation this year, 12 new endowments and counting as we move to the end of the year. I wanted to highlight just a couple that we're particularly excited about. Harish came to us just a few weeks ago. Harish grew up in India. Came to the United States to attend graduate school in Massachusetts, and he landed in the New River Valley as an engineer at Torque Robotics. Education has always been a huge part of his family and his upbringing, and he was so taken with our community and how welcome he felt here that he wanted to create a scholarship fund. So he approached us about starting a scholarship just a few weeks ago. He's got a wonderful personal story. We did a great article about him on our website. And it's just a wonderful example, I think, of one, how infectious our community is, quite frankly. Once you come here, it's hard to leave. But two, just a great example of how even if you don't have to be Bill Gates to start a fund at the Community Foundation, Harish is building his endowment over time and really investing in education. We were also pleased this year to develop a partnership with the United Way of Wythe County. That United Way decided to dissolve as a United Way affiliate, but they still wanted to be able to support Wythe County nonprofit organizations. So as they dissolved, they moved to move their assets over to a fund at the Community Foundation. And we're going to be working with them to continue supporting partner agencies in Wythe County for years to come. It's just a great example of how we're able to partner with other organizations or other foundations that may not want to take on the administrative burden that comes with fundraising and giving out money, but still want to experience the joy of giving to their community. So this is a wonderful partnership that we're excited about, and also excited to be able to offer some more of our programs in Wythe County. And then finally, just as much as we have been focusing outward, and by that I mean on giving grants, on working with nonprofit organizations, we are always working as a foundation on how do we improve ourselves internally. And a key part of that conversation this year has been standing up a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force that is focused on taking a deep dive over the next year into all aspects of the foundation's work, seeing how that fits with our values around diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we're doing well and what we could do better to ensure that we're engaging our community broadly. So you can see here, this is our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion just passed by our board. We're working right now with resources and support from several different other foundations that are having these similar conversations on how we can ensure in our grant making, in our investment, in our programs, that we're really living up to this value. This is a conversation for which we may be reaching out to many of you over the next year as well, because we know that this is not insular, and we need to ensure that we're engaging the community in these conversations, and we look forward to doing that. So that gives you kind of an overview of what we have done over the last year. And I just wanted to point out a couple things that we have seen in terms of needs in our community. But also I want to really emphasize that it has been absolutely remarkable how organizations have pivoted to serve more people and to meet the demand in an incredibly difficult time. And I hope that you've had the opportunity to learn about some different organizations in our area. We should be incredibly proud of the region. And I know that the foundation is proud to support these organizations. So in the area of human services and basic needs, you don't need to spend too much time watching TV to see that this is a huge issue with many people in our community and indeed across the country in need of food, in need of rental and utility assistance. The list goes on and on. We're fortunate in the area to have many organizations that work in this area. And I think that they have experienced a variety of challenges that many on this call could speak to. First and foremost, a huge increase in demand for services. So many food pantries, for example, reported to us that they were seeing a significant increase in demand, particularly from folks who have never had to access their services before. At the same time, there's a reduction in volunteers. So many of these organizations are relying either on older retirees or on the student population for volunteers. And of course, that's been more difficult during COVID. But they've been able to figure out how in the community they can leverage volunteers and relationships in order to meet the demand. So several have launched new programs. I'm highlighting here the YMCA at Virginia Tech's Meals on Maine program, something that we've been privileged to support both through our competitive grants and from donor advised funds. And they were able to stand up over the summer 7 different locations where families could come to access food. Moving into the fall, they've been continuing that work as well as doing hot meal delivery through a partnership with the Millstone Kitchen over at the old Price's Fork Elementary School. So again, a great opportunity to meet an increased demand and do so with a great deal of innovation. And I know we've got some folks on the call from the YMCA that could speak more to that. In the area of education, goodness, I mean, we've all heard how difficult it has been both for public education as well for education for adults, childcare, et cetera. The challenges of virtual instruction, of creating a healthy and safe environment. We also heard on the First Steps event that we had with public school teachers and administrators that they're greatly concerned about mental and emotional health, both for their teachers and their students, and of course, staffing. At the same time, we've seen, again, some great innovation. So I point out here the literacy volunteers in the New River Valley who focus on both English language learning as well as basic literacy. And they've stood up a bridge to virtual literacy program where they are working with individuals, getting them devices, getting them Wi-Fi access, and continuing to do that tutoring remotely. They've been the recipient of several grants from us as well. In addition, there's some great partnerships that are happening between libraries and nonprofits to continue to provide supports for families while they're engaging in virtual learning. And also, we've been pleased to be a part of an effort to create a resource app in 2021. This will be a resource where folks who are in need of services like literacy volunteers as well as basic needs are going to be able to search for the kinds of social services that are available easily in the New River Valley. So kind of a resource guide that's available through this electronic application as well as we're looking at other printed versions. And then finally, in arts and enrichment, I think that oftentimes we are understandably focused on meeting those basic human needs, but we also know how much the arts enrich our community, and many of them have certainly struggled. Many organizations, museums, theaters have had to close their doors. And even as they've been able to reopen, are certainly dealing with decreased patrons and an inability to really cover their bottom line. But once again, we're seeing amazing innovation. I point out here Wonder Universe, the children's museum that just reopened in a new space last November, only to have to close pretty quickly with COVID. But they were able during their closure to do a lot of home delivery kits and virtual programs to keep families engaged, and then have been able to reopen safely and have been a really important outlet for families who have, anyone who has youngsters at home knows how difficult it has been at times to keep them engaged during COVID. This has been a wonderful opportunity to keep them engaged and also to work in partnership with the school systems. Those are just a few of what we've seen. I think the overall story from the nonprofit community is there continues to be tremendous need. The community has been incredibly generous, both through the foundation, but just in general, to these organizations, and yet the need still exists. So I hope as we move into the second half of our hour, we can have some continued conversation and be happy to share more about what we've learned, but also be able to engage many of the folks on the call. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about lessons learned, because I think the foundation has also, like many organizations, had to pivot the way that we're doing things, not just working remotely, but also rethinking our grant making to be as responsive as possible to community needs during COVID. And so we've made some changes to the way we do our grant making, and I've also learned quite a bit about where our investments have been most helpful. And so I'm going to stop sharing because we'll have some others who will speak to these areas. I think our lessons learned really fall into two overall categories. The first is around our grant making and the importance of unrestricted giving and flexible giving during COVID. So to speak to that a little bit more, so you can just stop hearing me talk the whole time, I wanted to have Eric Chapman, who's a member of our board and is the chair of our distribution committee that oversees our grant making, speak to y'all a little bit about the changes we made this year and what we learned from that process. So take it away, Eric.
Thank you, Jessica. You say it like anyone thinks listening to me is going to be better than listening to you. I sincerely doubt that. Nice to see everybody on the call, some great community partners and some literal neighbors of mine, which is also cool. So I'm Eric Chapman. I chair the distribution committee for the Community Foundation and serve on the board of directors. And as Jess said, really what we've learned this year, and we're still learning, it ties in, I think, with how we kind of do things in this, I don't want to call it a new paradigm or unprecedented circumstances or all that jazz, but this ever-changing situation of the pandemic. So this past year, you all may recall, it feels like a lifetime ago, when the pandemic first began developing, things started shutting down in April and May. Jess came to me and came to the executive committee and said, hey, our normal competitive grant cycle occurs in the fall, which I'm very thankful for because I was very busy in the spring. But we were looking and seeing what was going on. And at that time, of course, no one knew what was going to happen, how long we were going to be shut down, how bad the pandemic was going to be, and all of that. So, but we could already see that there was going to be a lot of need. There were mass layoffs. Congress was both acting quickly and maybe not acting as quickly as it should have been, and many other things. So we knew there was going to be a lot of need, and the proposal that came before the board and executive committee, and I think Jess was really pressing on this, was we can issue emergency grants now. You know, maybe it's not our full amount, but we can take a chunk of the funds that we have, and we talked to our donors, and we put in quite a chunk, I think, of our unrestricted funds, and talked to some other people and said, we got to get money to these organizations now so they can do the good work, because literally the need and the population, the organizations that we support serve is doubling right now, right as their ability for funding and connecting was literally shrinking and falling apart. And of course, you know, the spring is often a big fundraising time for many of our organizations. That's because it's pretty, that's because there's summer outside, you can do events, and all of those were getting shut down. So what we did is we initiated a pandemic response grant. Very streamlined, very short, I think essentially one-page application. Just tell us you got need and tell us you're going to use it to help others. Through that program, it was up to $2,000 for basic operational needs. We gave out about $75,000, I think $76,000 in change between April and June, maybe late June, early July. And by that time, things, I don't want to say it's stabilized, they were still developing, but you know, it wasn't quite the zombie apocalypse. I stopped stockpiling chain link fence and digging a bomb shelter in the basement. I was still canning, so you know, it was a little bit of a balance of panic. But we started looking forward because we called ourselves and we said, all right, on any given year, our competitive grant process, which usually has two parallel tracks, we have operational support grants and program specific, kind of you identify something new you want to do grants, can be a little bit of a bear. It's kind of, we think of it as a training program for organizations that might be starting out to work up to the nuts and bolts you're going to need to apply for large scale grants, which is good. Now, all that aside, we realized that frankly, with everything else going on, all the schools being shut down, businesses being shut down, people concerned about where their next meal and how they're going to pay their mortgage was, frankly, nobody had time to sit around and fill out 27 individual questions and boxes and promote and propose programs that they may not be able to even initiate. Really, it was about keeping things moving, keeping the lights on, and serving the people who needed service in our region, our community. So again, I believe it was Jess who and the staff who came to us and said, we think we could scale this back. You know, they came to the executive committee first, and they came to me and they said, can we make the distribution process, the grant cycle this year, easier? And if so, how? And so one thing we did is we eliminated the parallel track for this year. We had just operational grants. And I think in doing so, what we did is we lowered the maximum threshold a little bit, I think from 5,000, and increased it a little bit from what would have been a programmatic grant. So you had a minimum or maximum of $4,000. But with operational grant support, you could use it for anything. You can use it to keep the staff employed. You can use it to keep the lights on. Although, frankly, most of the organizations, I suspect, did what they always do and put that right towards serving the needs in their community, probably before their own needs for most of them. So we did that, which was one thing. We carved back the application to make it a little bit easier for people to get the paperwork in, you know, check the boxes we have to and move forward. And then also what I think was a really great innovation this year is we did rolling distribution. So instead of we get all of our applications in, and then the group meets and we read them, and then we have a small group and we break out and debate them, and it all comes out, and we have this big party in October where we give out the money to everybody. We did all those pieces. We just accelerated them. And in prioritizing, as grants were approved and funded, whether that was for the application of donor advised funds, or whether that was through unrestricted funds that we had, or through some other mechanism, we went ahead and called them and cut the check and got it out to them, because the money was the need. We'll throw a party later and celebrate next year, and that'll be great. But it was getting this stuff out quickly to the organizations who needed it so they could continue to serve our community. So we learned that we could streamline a little, which is nice. We also learned we could adapt on the fly, which I think is very important. Throughout this process, the CFNRV has really impressed me with staying at the forefront of identifying critical needs that maybe they're probably there, but weren't as pressing prior to the pandemic. And at the same time, growing and transforming itself on the fly to meet the needs of the community and the organizations and the donors. You know, every time we're looking forward, it's been the staff, it's been the executive committee, and Ed Longhorn, our prior chairman, who was part of it at the time, who have come up and said, what we were doing isn't going to work here. We got to do something different moving forward and adapt. And I really feel like we've been a little bit more on the front end of that than many other organizations that one might expect to be, you know, assisting those in need. I don't know, like say Congress. In any case, so that gets us to where we're at now. Now the question is, what are we going to do moving into the future? And I think we're going to continue to try and be adaptive and see what the needs are, and if rearranging and restructuring how our giving cycles work is a viable way to meet those needs, and we have donor support to do it. I think that is something that we're going to continue. I left out one really cool, important innovation that kind of came out of this. We recently switched to a different giving platform this past year. And as part of that, in the context of the distribution cycle this year, we were able to open up our grant book to what we called a giving book. So we get all these grants in, and we take all the funds we have and we apply them as best we can to fund the best grants, the highest priority, and those that were advised by our donors they prefer to fund. It's never enough. And there are excellent grants and worthy causes that can use funding. And sometimes that book can then go out to donors or to others in the community to see if they would want to sponsor them. But this year we were able to virtualize that, digitize it, put it on the web, and open it up so that anyone who felt a need or wanted to support a cause could go into the giving book and fund it directly. I think we really didn't get quite as good a marketing as we could on this. Ashley did a wonderful job on it. I think it's the rest of us who dropped the ball with using Facebook properly or getting it on LinkedIn in the right format. But I think we had about $10,000 in addition to our funding cycle, which came through the community, which was just people looking at, Laura or my post or Jessica's post on LinkedIn and saying, you got a cause you support, maybe animal care is your thing. We may have a grant in here, a worthy grant that you could step in and fund. And if you want to fund it directly, every cent's going to go straight there to that grant. So you can do that. And I think that is an innovation we need to carry forward into the future. It's great. And it does what we've always hoped to do. It opens up giving directly to our community. Now, I'm done with my ramble. I'll stop for a minute, take a breath, and let anyone else in the committee or the board fill in the blanks of what I missed.
Thanks, Eric. That was, yeah, just it's been a fun year of our process, and I think we've learned so much through the process that we are going to think about how we continue many of these things into next year. And we're also going to be looking, of course, for feedback from the nonprofits we've served. The feedback we've gotten thus far has been very positive, but certainly we want to make sure we're being responsive going forward. So like Eric said, our major lessons learned were this is not the year to be putting a whole bunch of restrictions on how you're making your gift, right? This is the year where we are keeping doors open and supporting as many people as possible in our community. So those unrestricted grants that we gave, we're similarly encouraging our donors, whether it's to us or to other organizations, that this is the time to give unrestricted money to allow for maximum flexibility. The other lesson that we really learned this year is one actually that we started thinking about years ago. In 2015, we started the Fund for the NRV, which is a large unrestricted fund that we use to focus on collaboration in certain key areas of need. So we identified several areas where we didn't have a whole lot of endowed funding to support, and also where we saw the need for increased collaboration between organizations. And we decided to use some of our staff time and some of our funding to invest in relationship building so that we could, through collaboration, be able to address issues in a way that no one organization could do on their own. First Steps that I talked about is one example of that. We work on issues of aging, both for housing and social services. And another area I think that's been particularly impactful here is our Thrive network, which focuses on food assistance. And this has dozens of food pantries and feeding programs that are working together to meet the needs of our community and the increased needs that we've seen over the year. So there are many wonderful partners involved with this, but I asked Morris Fleischer, who's been part of this work for a really long time, to talk a little bit about the Thrive initiative in particular. I think that this year was a great example of how when you invest in relationships in advance, that those relationships can really help the community to be more resilient in times of crisis. And I hope that others who've been a part of the work feel that way as well. So Morris, if you would just talk a little bit about your experience with Thrive.
Well, first of all, there are some benefits of being on Zoom because I get to see everybody's dogs. So that's, I love how they're, I don't call it photo bombing on Zoom or Zoom bombing or whatever. So, but the NRV Thrive is, we've been meeting, I believe Jessica can correct me if I'm wrong, about 3 years now that we've kind of started that conversation, bringing lots of the different food pantries and ministries across the region to try to have some collaboration and perhaps build capacity through cooperation and sharing of resources, because we had many feeding ministries going on across the area, but it seemed like they were kind of silo type programs and no really connection between them. And so I'm thankful for Jessica really helping us take the leadership of this and bringing us together for these conversations. And, just in the last couple of months, we have seen a great benefit from this network of food sharing. I represent on the board of the Giles County Christian Service Mission. And in this role, I've seen a direct benefit that we have food not only coming from our traditional sources, from individual donors, churches, businesses, and things across Giles County per se, but also, for example, in our collaboration this summer with the Giles Community Garden. Now we're having fresh vegetables. We're increasing the nutritional value of what we're getting out. So not only are we giving out more food in general, it's better food. And that's, so many things that are given away by food pantries can tend to be a bit more on the starchier side, lots of carbohydrates and things. And so now we're able to give away fresh fruit and vegetables and things that are coming in during season. So through the Giles County Community Garden, also through the Glean Team in Blacksburg. Now I know the way to John Gilbreth's house and stopping by and picking up pumpkins and winter squash and those kinds of things. Sometimes it's fresh. Sometimes he and his wife have been working hard to freeze it. We'll meet at the Millstone Kitchen at the old Price's Fork Elementary School and pick up from their freezer squash and things that were processed and frozen and ready to be taken and then handed out through the mission. So we're really seeing some of this collaboration starting to pay off through the connections being made. I'm grateful the campus kitchen at Virginia Tech, the dining services there, we've received food that we've never received in the past through this collaborative network. We're getting deer meat through the Hunters for the Hungry from Elliston, from a food processing place there at Elliston now is coming in. And again, you've got people in Elliston helping folks in Giles. And so we're really starting to see these networks and collaboration happen. And I would just say on a personal level that it's been wonderful working with the staff at the CFNRV and for all of their help and leadership through this and making these conversations happen. We wouldn't have these benefits had this leadership not been provided. Plus the resources through the Give Local giving programs of the last couple of years, as well as the regular funding grants through the CFNRV. We have now purchased an adjacent property and are working on through grants and funding to transform that into a client select food pantry. So rather than just handing someone a food box with kind of pre-selected items, our clients will be able to come in and kind of shop, and it brings and restores human dignity to the process. They're able to pick and from certain items and whatnot. And plus it also eliminates waste because you're not just putting something in a box that nobody in that family or household eats. So you're able to, operate in kind of a different model. And we are working through that through the funds and grants that we've been able to access through the CFNRV and bring that together with other funding that we've received to make that happen right there in downtown Parisburg in Giles County. So we're just seeing tremendous benefits from this collaborative efforts and again, continue to get information. I know that there's still probably some food ministries out there that we don't quite have on the list yet that have not heard about us. So we're trying to reach out our tentacles a bit further because we're seeing how Campus Kitchens, for example, is taking food to Plenty in Floyd County almost on a weekly basis. And it's exciting to see all these food pantries. If you have excess of this, then we know we've got people we could say, hey, we've got extra of this. Would you like to have it? Can we bring it to you? Can you send somebody to pick it up? So it gets us talking, and then we're able to play to each other's strengths and support one another through this network. So I'm just grateful for this opportunity. Just another wonderful thing was this year, Blacksburg High School, their Honor Society, for example, always does Thanksgiving food boxes. And the last two Thanksgivings, they have sent things that they weren't unable to get distributed to our food pantry. So you've got, it's wonderful thinking about our neighbors helping neighbors. So we have Bruins helping Spartans and Green Waivers. And so that's exciting to see because we think about competition at high school levels, in boys and girls athletics, but now we're seeing people cooperate and really bringing communities together in that way. And again, without the CFNRV leading the charge in this, we wouldn't have those connections. So I want to say thank you to the board. Thank you for our donors. Thank you for, again, the staff here for making all of this happen for us. I'll shut up if you have any questions or other further thoughts.
Yeah, Morris, thank you so much. That was when I asked you to speak, I knew you would do a great job, but I appreciate so much all the kind words. I think these collaborations have been incredibly meaningful to the foundation. Certainly we get to see our impact as we create relationships and foster those, but we also get to learn a lot about the community, and we get to really be connected to those organizations and understand what they need in a personal way, and also to see just some wonderful innovations. So, you know, Giles County by far is one of the best areas and wonderful collaboration, particularly around food assistance. And so it's been nice to have them as a model for other parts of the region, as well as a partner, and to be able to help facilitate that. You know, investing in collaboration sometimes is not as exciting, and you can't always see the impact right away. And so it can be difficult, quite frankly, to convince prospective donors why that matters. But I think that it's been helpful this year to see that effort and investment that we've made at the foundation in these collaborative efforts really is bearing fruit, so to speak, in the community in really tangible and impactful ways. And I think that that's helped us to see beyond the grants that we give, the work that we can do in the region. So with that, we've given you a lot of updates and lessons learned, but we do have some time left, and I want to make sure there's still just opportunity to talk with one another. Again, we've got board members, donors, nonprofit organizations on this call. First, you know, happy if there's any questions or comments that you all have, please feel free to either unmute or put something in the chat. We'd love to use a little bit of time we have left to just talk and hear from each of you. Any questions or comments?
Just a quick thank you, y'all, for providing this update and everything you've been doing, especially over the last 9 months with the pandemic. I think it's really amazing how the networks that are already created and sustained by the Community Foundation have really been leaned on and advanced the work in the community. So thank y'all.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Well, I just wanted to invite anybody on this call to help us think through how our commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion can be rolled out in a really impactful way in the New River Valley. So we're wanting to make sure that the investments that we make and that the donors we solicit and other grants that we give are really addressing some of the marginalized folks in our community, no matter what their race. We really want to address those needs in a really important way. This has been a year, not only because of the pandemic, but because of racial injustice that has brought to mind that we need to be attentions getting around these issues as well. And so we look forward to any ways in which all of you on the call can help us connect to those communities, can make us more responsive as a foundation. And I'd love to hear now what you think we might be able to do around that. If you have some ideas, please, please, please put it in the chat or let us know what your thoughts are about that. Looks like Ann wants to respond.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Community Foundation's relationship with Dialogue on Race, which I think has done just tremendous work in our valley.
Yeah, that's the first group on our list. We've been connected. We need to be much more connected. So we have some of our own members who are a part of that, but I want to see us cement that relationship into something kind of systemic. And that's one of the first places we're going to go. Thanks, Ann, for confirming that source. Other thoughts about that? We'd love to hear your thoughts about that, whether that's today or any time in the future.
I know, Pat, that Dialogue on Race is having their annual seminar, which I didn't read much on it, but I've been to it before, and it's a full day event, and people break out and discuss issues, primarily racial, but also other inclusion issues. So if we don't have that on the notice board of notes sent out by the foundation, that might be a good thing.
I'll let you know that was actually postponed. They sent out a notice today saying it's being postponed.
Oh,
Randy, do they
Without
have
a
a
scheduled date yet.
Do they have an alternative date yet, Randy?
They don't yet. They said they would send one, but they just sent that notice this morning.
Well, we want to make sure we stay in touch on that. Thanks both of you for mentioning that.
Yeah. Other comments, lest you think that we were just going to rely on you to ask questions. We also have questions to ask you. So, because, you know, always be prepared. So I'm wondering in particular what you all think about what our region has really done well during COVID. I shared with you just a few of the programs we've supported that have really just blown us away. Meals on Maine program, for example, the literacy volunteers. But you all have had the opportunity to be involved with or see other organizations. Do you have any thoughts on what you've seen during this year that you think our region's done particularly well?
I would like to hear more about Giles County, as the pandemic was approaching, created a check on the elderly program, and I don't know how widespread that was, but I know they put that into commission immediately before any lockdown, and tried to connect particularly with all the elderly in the county who did not have some form of caretaker or family nearby. And the Giles County staff stayed, even when their offices were closed, they stayed in contact by phone. So an elderly person whose prescription ran out could call. And I don't know how operative the program still is, but it was innovative and it was great. And there were many elderly who were being, you know, if they wanted someone to call them every day, county personnel called them every day.
Wow, that's amazing.
Fantastic program. And I'll just share, when the senior check-in program was being started, that was right when things started shutting down in March. And I attended a focus meeting. For those who might not be familiar with focus, it's a collaborative effort in Giles County that is just absolutely spectacular. It is so impressive, led by the county with many different social service organizations. And I have to say, I was blown away on that call with how quickly everybody within a couple days was working to figure out, okay, what can we do? You can do this and we can do this. It included the senior check-in. I mean, it is another great example of how that investment in collaboration that the county had put in place was being activated. And I just came away from that meeting being so proud about that work. Just the fact to witness it was so exciting. The other thing is I'm kind of watching through some of the comments that folks are making. Catherine has included in the chat some information she's requesting for VT Engage, which has been a longtime partner with us and with many different organizations. So you can take a look at that. And I think that one of the other things that we've seen in the community is that for our donors, folks in this community who have been in a position to give have been incredibly generous. In fact, this is going to be, if not the best, one of the best fundraising years the Community Foundation has ever seen. And I think that's in large part because we are fortunate to work with a lot of very generous people. And I hear from our donors all the time about what they're seeing, even when they couldn't have events or opportunities to gather, how the fundraising is going. So I'm going to ask, Linda Hayes is on the call with us with the Giles Fund. Linda, do you want to just share a little bit from what the Giles Fund has done this year?
Oh, thank you. I'd love to. Sorry I'm not visible, but you'd understand if I turned my video on. And I was late to the call, so I missed the beginning. I'm amazed this year because we've been known for having 2 events consistently, which has been wonderful ways for engagement within our community as well as fundraising. We've had Women on Wednesday, a luncheon that's had as many as 120 attendees, and our annual Loaves and Wishes. Well, this year with COVID, of course, we couldn't do it, but we've had a long history of personal letter writing, the old-fashioned way. And coincidentally, right at the beginning, just probably before we even thought COVID was going to be shutting us down, we were in the midst of setting up our next letter writing campaign, which we typically do in March. Well, we get together and we have letters that we print and a wonderful message that usually Anne is the author on. And we personally add a note to that at the bottom of the page from each of us. We send out a couple of hundred letters and we add a note because usually some of us know many of the people and we send those out. Well, to see that response come in and to see the notes, and even today, Laura's nodding her head because she has to process those darn checks. But even I can tell because of the envelope we include, and these initially come back to me because I write thank you notes back to them. I can see people held on to that. And even if they couldn't give in the spring, they're still giving. And then we went ahead and did an initiative because again, we couldn't do our events, and we did a newsletter giving our community an update of who we were funding, what was going on, and just this update in an old-fashioned newsletter. We don't have everyone's email addresses. So that has resulted right away. I could see the impactfulness of the money coming in. So we've raised, I forget where we are, Jessica, $33,000 this year without having a single event. So probably our best year ever, and it's all about engagement. But the notes that I get from people, I usually put them on my bulletin board because they're so heartwarming to see even people who have their own business. One of our local propane companies sent a $1,000 check saying, I know you need this to support the community. You know, so many of them that were doing well because in some cases their businesses went up because of homebound people. They were in turn going ahead and giving back. So I was on the phone with someone the other day and they said, of course, we haven't been able to do fundraising this year. And I just snickered because it was like, well, then you must not be thinking outside the box or thinking about old-fashioned ways of people talking to people about the need. So just that's been some of our successes, and plus having a very diverse panel that is involved in different aspects of areas of the county. We all have different things that we're involved in, different things, so we can represent those groups and gather those needs and try to be responsive. So we try to be a model of what I call a true community foundation because we touch so many and have so many involved. So, and thanks for, this is a wonderful meeting. I'm sorry, Anne, that we don't have more of our panel on here. And I hope that maybe this is some ways to do some more engagement with the different funds that you manage all the way through. So thanks for letting me add my 2 cents.
Absolutely, Linda. Thank you so much. It's always nice to work with different groups of donors and see the different innovative ways that they go about both giving as well as raising money. And so it's always fun to see, in particular, the Giles Fund, not surprisingly, always one of our most active and creative once again this year.
And successful.
And successful, yes. And of course, you know, not just in bringing the money in, but in getting the money out the door. I mean, there are so many organizations that are funded by the Giles Fund. We have the Floyd Fund that focuses in Floyd County. We have the Eclectic Enophiles that focus in Radford and Pulaski. A lot of wonderful donor groups that really speak to what the foundation has been about for a long time, which is the idea that anyone can be a philanthropist, anyone can give. And when we pool our money at the foundation or in individual funds, we can really make an impact. So we're nearing the end of our time. I do hope that we can do more of these going into next year as regular updates for you on what the foundation is doing. And also how we can be as responsive as possible to our donors, to our nonprofits, and to our partners. And I'm just going to ask Pat, as our board president, to kind of say a few words to close us out. So go ahead, Pat.
Well, I just want to start by thanking the staff who are on this call. Ashley's a brand new employee. We've been benefiting so much by her new position at the foundation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Laura and Jessica, this work couldn't happen without such a dedicated staff. And I just want to recognize how much we depend on you, both for your initiative and for your hard work and your connections to the community. You almost make me cry. You know, this is, these have been wonderful stories today. Thank you so much. And as we end the year, don't forget that the foundation itself has survived through a PPE loan and other ways. So we are a nonprofit itself, and most of the donations we get are restricted. They go to specific places. So we too are in the business of doing an end of year fundraising campaign. And if you haven't already done so and it's in your heart, we're looking to raise $20,000 by the end of the year. We've got 9,000 about right now. We'd look forward to any gifts that you might share with us to keep the staff alive and to keep the office doors open. Just like every other nonprofit, we have our own bills to pay. We couldn't do this work though without the partners, and I've been inspired by your stories today. I'm so glad that I was part of this call. Thank you for being part of this, and we look forward to celebrating in person. But I think we got to hear stories today we wouldn't have heard, Jess, if we had been in an in-person format. So I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and enjoy the holidays. I hope everyone gets some time to rest and relax and look forward to a new year. And if there's anything that the foundation can do to further support you, please let us know. Give us a call, as Laura is saying. All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, Jess.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.